Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today, we have Larry Fink saying that BlackRock believes Bitcoin is an asset class in itself on a Q3 earnings call. Bitcoin ETFs had a huge day with $550 million of inflows. Mog Auras and Sproto Gremlins from Murad's NFT list are up 61% and 14% respectively. Also, multiple Beeple sales in the last 24 hours, with GigaChad, January the 1st, and Bull Run seeing strong sales. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs, plus a very anticipated, awesome conversation with Han, the founder of Shape, and the legendary audio-visual generative artist, Deafbeef, who has one of the most fascinating histories you can imagine, spanning music, electrical engineering, computer graphics, and jewelry. So stay tuned for that in the second half of the show. Today, we've got Legendary and Han in the co-host seats with me. We're ready to get into it. But just before we do that, friends, a reminder that nothing that we say here is financial advice. Unfortunately, this market is very risky. And to be completely honest, we do not know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Tuesday. It is the 15th of October. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, it's Tuesday and it's good to be back. We started a bit of a new schedule from
Where were
this
you?
on.
Yeah, where were you yesterday?
Yeah, where I'm taking Monday off. You will take generally Thursdays off. However, this week will be a bit different because you're going to be traveling. But we basically said we professionalized that show to that degree that it can run from Monday to Friday, with not every day having the both of us, and basically managing to each take a day off to do some research, to prepare some of the other segments, and just get some more business things for the growth of the modern market done. And that was kind of my first show-less Monday, if you want to call it like that. And it's pretty weird because I've been checking in to see, is everything running? Is everything working? Does everyone have all the links? So it's, I don't know. It was a very productive time because I'm like, if I have this hour off, I'm not going to waste it not doing like nothing useful. But it felt kind of wrong to not be on the show on Monday and know that it's going on and happening without me.
That's funny. Two immediate questions. Number one, the purpose of having a day off is to do the research for your new segment, Legendary DeFi, every Thursday. Did you do it?
Yep, I did it.
Damn, you actually did it. I thought you were going to just have the day off, have your 3-day weekend.
No,
but yeah, I mean, you see.
I did spend Sunday night in the trenches trading some meme coins, which I typically wouldn't do that late night. But I did do the segment. I was like, I'm not gonna waste the Monday to then run into pressure to do it today or tomorrow or whatever. So I did script that.
Love it. Han, Legendary's been living this life of luxury with the Monday off. I hear, running Shape is not necessarily the same on your leisurely Monday evening, right?
Definitely, it is a 24/7. It is pretty intense in both the good and bad ways. There's a lot of things happening. Everything has to be taken care of at that moment, and yeah, it's amazing. Wouldn't be doing anything else.
Love it. As you say, so much stuff going on, so many quality artists dropping all the time. Just a reminder, if you're just joining us, we have the legendary audio-visual generative artist Deafbeef with us. He'll be joining us in the second half of today's show. We're going to do a little interview on his latest work that's going to be coming to Shape tomorrow. So cannot wait to have that conversation in just a little bit. But the rest of the show, we will speed run through for the first half an hour, get you up to speed with everything else that's happened in the last 24 hours. So let's get into it, starting with the headlines and the price action. Let's get to the price action first. We have Bitcoin just up 1% to 65.6K. ETH is up almost 3% to 2.6K. And we have Solana just up 1% at $154. Getting into the headlines themselves, Larry Fink says BlackRock believes Bitcoin is an asset class in itself. On Q3 earnings call, Bitcoin ETF sees huge day with $550 million of inflows. Going to dive into like what was exactly said there in just a little bit. Nate Garachi shared that it was a monster day for Bitcoin ETFs. 20 billion net inflows in 10 months, simply ridiculous, and blows away every pre-launch demand estimate. So the experts are saying, look, no, it doesn't matter about the price action immediately. This is pretty significant inflows nevertheless. Number 2, Mog Auras and Sproto Gremlins from Murad's NFT list are up big. Legendary is going to provide a little bit of a breakdown there in just a bit. Also multiple Beeple sales in the last 24 hours, with Giga Chad January the 1st and Bull Run selling between 6.5 ETH and 19.99 ETH. It's Giga Chad selling for much higher. I cannot help but think if that's got something to do with Elon's Tesla speech that he gave the other day, where he revealed all the humanoid robots, and Giga Chad includes Elon in that. So could be something to do there. Notable sales from around the space: CryptoPunk Top Hat sold for 40 ETH. Beeple Giga Chad, as I said, 19.99 ETH. And a Dmitry Cherniak Ringers piece, a very nice one, sold for 10.75 ETH. On the meme coin side of things, we have things cooling down a little bit. Pepe's flat, SHIB is flat, WIF is down 5%, Bonk is up 1%, Popcat's down 1%. Turbo is up 30%. That was probably one of the biggest movers in the last 24 hours. SPX is up just a little bit. MOG is down 10%. So nothing concrete there. Things are kind of up and down or a bit flat, not like over the weekend where everything was up only. That's what's going from the headline. That's what's going on in the headline side and the price action. Legendary, do you want to share what's going on in the NFT market?
Absolutely. NFT market looks pretty interesting because one half of it is basically pretty flat. That's the majors. That's collections like the Bored Apes down 1% at a 10.85 ETH floor, basically unchanged over the last 7 days. Pudgy's flat from yesterday, 8.88 ETH floor. However, they are down massively over the last week, almost 10%. Azuki's unchanged from yesterday, still sitting at a 5 ETH floor. That's the majors, the collections we typically look at. But as you insinuated, the meme side looks completely different. The ladies up 40% over the last 7 days at a 4.45 ETH floor. The Sproto Gremlins up another 14% today, up 118% over the last 7 days, 3.9 ETH floor. Obviously, often mentioned on Murad's NFT list. Very, very similar picture for the Mog Auras, but with even more inflated numbers. They're up to a 0.48 ETH floor, up another 60% over the last 24 hours. And that brings the total price pump to 2,320% over the last 7 days. It's been a long time since we had numbers like this when it comes to NFT movements. Project Ian, however, also featured on Murad's list, is down a bit over the last 24 hours. It's down 16% to 1.92 ETH floor. However, still up 113% over the last 7 days. And moving on to the Solana side of things, we have Retard Your Cousins almost hitting a 40 Sol floor and getting pretty close, honestly, to flipping Mad Lads, which are hovering at a 46, 48 Sol floor. So they are definitely in range to become the top collection on Solana by floor price.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. One being like a Milady derivative, the other being the NFT collection of arguably one of the bigger exchanges in the world, or one that is hoping to be. So clearly two very different value props there. Let's just hit the Web3 roundup now as well. We're going to start doing this at the top of the show to get you up to speed with everything else that's been going on. But just before we do that, we'd like to shout out today's sponsor for today's show, Gondi. Gondi is the premier NFT lending platform. Just yesterday on Gondi, G-Money's famous ape, CryptoPunk, had its $700,000 loan refinanced from 17.4% to 16.6%, achieving a better deal for G-Money without him needing to do anything. If you're in the business of NFTs, check Gondi out to earn some interest as a lender on your ETH or USDC, or as a borrower, you can unlock liquidity from your Grail assets. Getting into the Web3 roundup, thanks Legendary for having this on screen. Hyperliquid announces their token Hype. You need to sign up to participate in the drop for eligible users. Solve Protocol announces a $25 million raise, fundraising to pave the way for mass adoption of Bitcoin staking. Tokyo-based MetaPlanet once again buys another $1 billion worth of yen of Bitcoin. And Sui Foundation deny insider selling. We talked about this yesterday, explaining an infrastructure partner was able to sell $400 million worth of tokens. It was a bit of a strange explanation, to be honest. It's like, no, there was nothing nothing strange going on yet. There's very big wallet that allegedly sold with without any wrongdoing. In some more artistic news, OSF is going to be dropping a new art piece with Red Bull. MoonPay changed their profile picture to a pudgy penguin, another huge corporate account kind of becoming aligned with the Penguins. And then finally, Blast announces Big Bang winning teams who will receive 250K each and mentorship. I think that's very exciting from an entrepreneurial perspective, with Chains trying to really back teams who want to build out with them. So that is that. Legendary. Anything catching your attention from the roundup just there?
Yeah, there's two things standing out to me. One is the MoonPay news. I think it's pretty interesting. Pudgies have that distribution strategy where they did hit 30 billion views on Giphy, but at the same time, they're also quote unquote targeting the corporate accounts. We still have Vanek rocking the Pudgy. We now have MoonPay rocking a Pudgy. And that's honestly a pretty strong strategy as well, because if you think about the fact that Vanek is doing more than just having a BTC and ETH ETF, other people who are following VanXX will see a Pudgy Penguin. MoonPay probably serving as an onboarding ramp. Not if you don't have any interest in crypto, you won't come across MoonPay. But if you on-ramp and see them on X, you will again see that Pudgy Penguin. So that extra touch point branding-wise is a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, and once again, I take your point. They're definitely the go-to brand for the corporate entities who are looking to enter into the space. It was a funny thing that happened yesterday. If you were unaware of the Penguin power, I had messaged in our private chat amongst the hosts. We saw the CEO of a company, and we said, look, we want to get that guy on the show. Like, it would be a great conversation. We've used their product. We think it's great. Let's all. And he'd commented to say that, you know, crypto podcasts are so bad. They're like really depressing. No one has anything good to say. It's like all depressing or bad takes. And then I said, let's all comment to make sure that we try to get him on ours, because we want to have a chat. We think their product's great. And the only person he replied to was the Penguin. The Penguin power is unprecedented. So that's good. Hopefully we can set that conversation up. It will definitely be an interesting one. Funky, welcome to the stage, my friend. What's kind of catching your attention in the market in general?
GM fam, yeah, I actually wanted to chime in on the Sui thing yesterday, and I think I have a reason what they're explaining and why they're being, not exactly coming out and saying it. I have a hunch that the money that was liquidated is going to be used to fund Walrus nodes. So where my company is working with Miston Labs and the Sui Foundation, Walrus nodes is effectively a decentralized storage solution that will run a middleware client to the Sui blockchain. So instead of having bloated state on Sui itself, they'll use this side network of decentralized storage for all the heavy things like NFTs, videos, anything like that you wouldn't want to put on the main blockchain state. So this is actually something that's being incubated by Miston Labs, and it is affiliated with Sui. So I wondered why, if they're saying it's just an infrastructure partner, it would make a lot of sense if they had put aside a certain allocation, knowing that this has been in the planning and in the works for a while. And then maybe they were using that to kind of bootstrap the funding that's going to be required for the Walrus nodes when the chain goes live. We just last week we were one of 5 to run the test of the testnet. And then there's going to be a testnet. The full thing is going to be in Q1. And even if you look at the Walrus protocol candle on X, it only has 4,200 followers versus Sui, which has over 750,000. Now, again, this is speculation on my part, just to be clear. I'm not saying that this is the case, but it would make a lot of sense, because as soon as we were talking about it yesterday, that's what I was thinking, is that maybe they were using this to help then fund Walrus and get it going, because it's going to be a wall token and everything else. The white paper is pretty interesting, but I just at least wanted to chime in on the whole Sui situation.
Love it, man. That's really, really interesting. Thanks. It sounds like you are the infrastructure partner, Funky. Did you just liquidate many millions of dollars of Sui?
No, if I had that much Sui, I'd be hanging on. It wasn't me for sure.
Okay. I thought it might have been what you were confessing, but no, that's super interesting. Always appreciate your additional insight into that. Probably we'll be leaning on you again, Funky. We're going to get into the Bitcoin stuff now. You are Bitcoin resident expert. Big news coming yesterday. There was some awesome inflows. I'm going to share my screen for the people who are watching in. Remember, we do this live on Twitter Spaces, but we're also streaming live on Twitter video and YouTube video as well, if you prefer to watch in. Nate Garachi, who's someone who we've been following a lot as it relates to the ETFs, shared this yesterday, said monster day for spot Bitcoin ETFs, $550 million of inflows, now approaching $20 billion net inflows in 10 months. No matter what you say about anything, it's simply ridiculous. It blows every pre-launch demand estimate. This is not degen retail dollars coming in. It's advisors and institutional investors continuing to slowly adopt. Some further context on what else happened. This kind of conversation from a Q3 earnings call from Blackrock came to light. This was shared by Eric Balkunas, the Bloomberg ETF correspondent. He shared this that Larry Fink said. He said, first on the presidency, he said, I'm not sure if either president or other candidate would make a difference as it relates to crypto. I do believe the utilization of digital assets are going to become more and more of a reality worldwide. On conversations he's been having with institutions, he said they've been having conversations about how they should think about digital assets, what type of asset allocation there should be. Specifically on Bitcoin, he said it's an asset class in itself. We've kind of reported on this multiple times already, but this is kind of picking up speed. I think it's an alternative to other commodities like gold. So I think the application of this form of investment will be expanded to the role of Ethereum as a blockchain can grow dramatically. So if we can create more acceptability, more transparency, more analytics related to these assets, then it will be expanded. ETH bulls, obviously very excited to get the shout out from the head of Blackrock as well as part of this conversation. So I think those were the two maybe main points that I wanted to pick out. Legendary, did you have any additional thoughts here? What was your thoughts on the news? Any reflections? Would love to go to Funky and Han as well on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to keep it quick. I have something to show on screen that's coming from CoinGlass. It's day by day net inflows into the BTC ETFs. And if you just have a look over the last couple of days, you will basically see the 10th of October was a rather weak day, a lot of outflows. Then you have mixed days where you have outflows from one, inflows into another one. But that 14th of October, the yesterday one is pretty insane, with basically all green, with the smallest inflow ranging from 600 BTC, with the biggest one to almost 4K BTC, totaling, as you said, 9K BTC, which is way more than the emission of BTC on a daily basis. So definitely market moving news, and a very positive one. And I was honestly surprised to see ETH mentioned in that. I mean, pretty happy with the price action. Not going to complain about that. But it's a pretty strong call, and definitely a much needed vote of confidence for ETH bulls who might have had a bit of a harder time the last couple of months.
Couple of months. I think it's been a little bit longer potentially, but I take your point. Funky, resident Bitcoin expert. What are your thoughts here on the latest words that came out from Larry Fink?
They're amazing. I mean, this is what every Bitcoiner has been dreaming of. Well, maybe not, right? Because I think there is something to be said about the fact that the cypherpunk ethos of Bitcoin is being destroyed as the TradFi pros all pile in, right? So there is that. I'm a pragmatist at the end of the day. You know, we know where this is all going. Bread's not here, so we have to give the up and to the right comment. But I just feel like the thing that I've been paying attention to especially is the declining amount of like spot Bitcoin that you can actually get from exchanges. This is just disappearing to the point, you know, that they're clearly gobbling up more than's being mined every single day by orders of magnitude. And I feel like the supply shock, you know, you keep seeing on the timeline, you know, Elio talks about this a lot. You can only keep the beach ball underwater for so long. And I feel like we're at that moment that, you know, as I was saying a couple of weeks ago, when everybody was like, oh, what happened to October on like October 2nd? You know, we're just at that point where I think it's going to start to get really crazy. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the end of the year with an $85,000+ Bitcoin. Not financial advice at all.
Fair enough. Look, maybe one follow-up question for me, Funky, and then I want to go to Han on the Beeple news before we get into the interview with Deafbeef in just a moment. Stefano in the comments asked, are you all bullish on Ordinals? The thing about Ordinals at the moment, which I guess is a unanswered question, is lots of new people like the idea. They think that there's a lot of capital on Bitcoin, and kind of relative to Bitcoin's market cap, it represents just such a small thing. Therefore, it has so much room to grow. Also, in addition to that, it's got the most capital on it. Therefore, assuming that that capital will want to be spent. That's, I think, an opinion that's held by some of the newer people who are more familiar with NFTs, who've maybe been on ETH first. However, you maybe are in more of the old school book where you're trained daily to buy Bitcoin and not sell your Bitcoin. In order to purchase an ordinal, you would need to sell your Bitcoin. What's your take on ordinals and runes and that whole ecosystem that's, you know, trying to simulate some economic activity on Bitcoin?
I mean, admittedly, I find it quite distressing seeing Bread's analysis about the whole, yes, the data is on chain, but the ownership is off chain. And I haven't really dug into that. I'll be the first to admit I do not own any runes, any ordinals, anything like that. However, the first part of your statement, I think, is factually correct. I think we're going to see a true unlock of that capital through a lot of these Bitcoin L2s. And just admittedly, I interviewed Alexei Zamayatin from Bob yesterday. And the more he talked during the interview, the more I realized it's like if Bitcoin and Ethereum had a baby, it would be Bob. Because this whole, I'm very serious, this whole hybrid L2 thesis, the rationale for why they chose the OP stack and EVM to access the Bitcoin liquidity through one-click staking and everything else, I really think people are sleeping on this, because there are people who are going to be in the middle of the road like me that maybe I don't want to expose all of our Bitcoin to DeFi and EVM and stuff like that, but I'm willing to play around with it, especially if there's a return to it and I can stack more sats just passively, taking whatever rewards and then just getting more sats. I mean, that to me is the end game. And I feel like that there is something to be said about it is the biggest chain, the God chain, whatever you want to call it. There's a ton of liquidity there. And once these Bitcoin L2s start to figure out how to unlock that and earn yield on Bitcoin, game over.
I like it. I actually do like Bob as well. I've kind of parked some capital there for a while ago. I like the concept. Also, just like the framing of it. If Bitcoin and ETH have a baby, like it does seem to be like a an interesting prospect. Look, we'll keep tabs on that as that moves forward. As always, just got a few minutes left before we get into today's headline interview with Deafbeef. Can't wait to get into that conversation. The final headline for today was a bunch of Beeple sales taking place in the past 24 hours. We had GigaChad selling for, I'm just going to find it so I can share it on screen. Here it is. Had GigaChad selling for almost 20 ETH. And then we also had a few more. Which ones were they? They were January the 1st, also on screen, Bull Run. And these ones sold between 6.5 and 8 ETH. Maybe a question for you, Han, here. Beeple's really showed himself to be someone who is very, very desired in the market in general. I think his strategy so far, he's not like minting routinely anymore, is he? Like, I think there's a bit of a difference sometimes between people who are minting more. He's being like highly selective at the moment. What's your take on Beeple's kind of, not just these sales in particular, but how he's kind of been progressing so far?
Yeah, Beeple is a one of the big figures in crypto art, and yeah, indeed he is selective about the things that he mints. But I think a lot of people are realizing whenever somebody does something basically every day without pause for now. I mean, of course, I don't know if he's continued it for every single day, but basically it's been 17 years since he started drawing every day. And so through capturing like the mimetic meme, the mimetic like moment of every day, like whatever is like the most interesting thing that is happening that day, and capturing that moment in his crazy and amazing style, I think that has been what has created the following and the legend that is Beeple.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that, right? The process, the process that you go through when you do the thing that it is that you're destined to do. When you do that every day, the amount of respect you kind of accrue, and then when you're actually good at it as well, like some of the pieces are either distressing or hilarious or entertaining, but they make you feel something. I think that like the inspiration of emotion is always there with people. So appreciate your take there, Han. Look, those are the headlines. Legendary. One more final point.
Yeah, one final point of that. What I saw interesting was Roll Pal posted the Giga chat and basically
Okay.
said, "We'll have a bright future, will be unaffordable." And even Murat commented under that, saying that he agrees Beeple is an extremely talented artist and basically thinks that this asset or the Beeple NFTs will go parabolic as well. So I didn't see Murat really dabbling into NFT art, but it's interesting to see that call coming from him as well.
That is very funny. And it's funny that now the market, for whatever reason, whether it's right or wrong, will think something of this kind of meme coin caller now dabbling in art and providing his perspective on the art. That's just how crypto Twitter works sometimes. Interesting stuff. Thanks for that additional information, Legendary. I think if you can stop sharing the screen, then I won't remove you from the thing. There we go. Look, we're super excited now to get into today's interview. Today's interview is with Deafbeef. Little introduction here. For the past 20 years, Deafbeef has been immersed in a wide assortment of fields. Some of the most interesting things that you can really imagine, which overlap art and tech. He studied music and electrical engineering. He's started a music recording studio. He's done research in computer graphics, and until recently, he's supported himself as a blacksmith, running an artisan craft business making hand-forged jewelry out of alternative metals. He's best known in the space at the moment as an audiovisual generative artist, and he's adapted his art practice with a very minimal tool set. He purposely chose a cheap laptop and C compiler, and then tries to write code from scratch that can produce sound and animation without using any type of external library. So incredibly eclectic and interesting background. Deafbeef, welcome to the stage with us. Welcome to the show. So great to have you with us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So happy that you're with us. So before we explore your latest work, I definitely want to just set the scene for the audience who might be new to your work and your practice. I wanted to ask about your very eclectic creative history. When I was doing the research and for this conversation, it's like an incredibly eclectic creative history over the last 20 years, from music to electrical and engineering to computer graphics to being a blacksmith. Where did you actually start with all of these things, and how do you move between these interests?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a good question. Where did I start? I don't know. I've always been just like, I jump around from interest to interest is basically what it is. And at some point I accepted that's the way that it was going to be. And so I tried to structure my life in a way that I could do a lot of different things. I turned down, certain opportunities that would maybe be like long-term commitments or kind of pigeonhole like in a very certain area, because I know it's like, even though I'm very interested in it now, maybe a few years down the line, the pendulum swings, I'm going to move to something else. And so I've kind of had that in the back of my mind, kind of accepted that about myself, and kind of committed to this kind of wandering path of jumping around between things. And being a generalist, I think, a lot of, there's a certain amount of like, chance and luck to have dropped into NFTs when I did, but I think I was well prepared for it in a way. And, being surrounded by other people that had also kind of fallen down this rabbit hole and had kind of eclectic interests. Yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but hopefully that answers a little bit of the question.
No, it's fascinating. What made you think, you said that you were well prepared for this space? after dabbling around and kind of being a bit of a wanderer beforehand, what made you prepared for it?
Well, I mean, we prepared in the sense that, well, there are a couple of things, but one, just being open to it. If I had been like really focused, like say on if I had like some other career that was demanding to like the straight and narrow kind of thing, like you don't often have the opportunity to like, you know, come off the beaten path a bit and fall down these rabbit holes. And so just having the time and inclination to do that, I think, is sort of a product of that. One thing I will say, um, it seems weird, but I feel like what I was doing with my blacksmith thing, I was making handmade wedding rings, right? So I made made and sold over 3,000 handmade, hand forged wedding rings out of materials like stainless steel, titanium, not necessarily precious metals, but in a way, I kind of think that prepared me a bit for accepting the immaterial value of NFTs, because what I learned was that people were very, very pleased for me to make them something out of a basically worthless material, right? Like stainless steel. But they would ascribe like value to this, and it's because of the narrative of how it was made and about this being something special for the narrative of their relationship, right? As a symbol of their relationship. And so, in a way, like, I mean, it made sense to me that, you know, an entry on a public ledger could and something immaterial could have value beyond, you know, it's not something you can hold in your hand. It's not physical, but there's a story behind it. And so it made sense to me. Basically, it clicked right away.
That's so interesting that I guess people's natural reaction so often is to ascribe no value to digital assets, or at least people from the material world. But the way that you viewed certain physical objects is that it was basically exactly the same. Is that the kind of conclusion that you were coming to? That there's no real difference in that respect?
That's right. Basically, it's like the atoms, right? Like the material itself is really just it's just a signifier, like the same way it's like a pointer, right? The same way you have a like a reference on a blockchain, because you could get exactly the same type of ring. You know, you could get a titanium ring on Amazon for $20, but nobody wants to have. Most people don't want to have that as the story of their relationship, right? But if you're buying it from, you know, handmade by a Canadian blacksmith, and there's time and care that went into it, and there's the story behind it. Like, this is that's the value. It's not the fact of like what it's made of. It's not made of gold, right? It's made out of stainless steel. There's hammer marks on it. There's evidence that it was hand produced, right? But being hand produced, that means there was an investment of time and care, and there's a proof of that. And you know, the same thing about, you can have digital art. You have and you have it registered on a public ledger. There's some type of proof that it was made by so and so and at a certain time. The value behind it is it's not the fact that you can hold it in your hand or hang it over your couch or whatever. There's the immaterial value to it, and so those are the two things that I saw an overlap with.
I love that. This raises a really important question that I've been thinking about. One of the challenges that digital art faces, which is when you walk into a traditional gallery, or even as you described, like when you understand the process by which something's been made, there's like a human appreciation for that process. Like, oh, this has taken, you mentioned this has taken so much time, and it's almost as if there's a relationship between the longer something takes to make, the more effort that's put in, the more care which has been put in, therefore it can be more valuable. And maybe in the same way, like you go into these galleries and you see humongous paintings or like things of like true scale, and there's a natural appreciation, whether you're a young, old, sophisticated, unsophisticated art appreciator, that like, you know, this is something, you know, you can see that it would have taken a lot of time to do. Conversely, I think there's a challenge with digital art sometimes where it's like, I don't know if it's as clear to be able to perceive how some of the stuff gets made. How do you try to address that when trying to communicate with your audience and your collectors to try to make them feel the appreciation of what they might only experience on a screen sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's a challenge. There is kind of, I mean, you see a painting. People understand paintings. They understand handmade things. They see if there's hammer marks on a ring, that there was time invested. So that's kind of like a shortcut for people. I will say that I don't think that art has to have a lot of effort invested into it for it to be either meaningful or valuable. But that's most of the way that many people conceive of it that way. I mean, speaking of Beeple, like the everydays, people see that. They see that there's effort, there's kind of commitment being put in over a long period of time, and that itself is wonderful. But I don't think that art needs to have that, right? Robert Smithson said that you can make art with a glance, right, by selecting something, right? And we see that all the time. It doesn't necessarily have to have effort involved. But that being said, I do try to communicate something about my craft, and moving away from metalwork and stuff. Like I work with low level code. I write code to make animation and sound and animation, and I try to communicate about the craft of that and what it is that's important to me. And sometimes I use analogies with metalwork and for that. And I don't know what extent I've been successful with that, but I think that there is an element if you know a little. I mean, it's easier to communicate this to people with like younger people with some type of tech background. It's much more difficult to communicate this to people of an older generation or traditional art collectors. But there's certainly I see a huge parallel between craft of coding and any other craft working with materials. You're working with, I chose to work with code the way that I do because it's kind of an homogeneous material. You're working with code, you make tools. In blacksmithing, you make your own tools. You're making tools out of iron to use those tools to forge iron. And you don't have to stop and go to the hardware store and get some special material, order it in. You have everything that you need at your command, kind of within arm's reach. And it's the same way that I feel. It's kind of a self-contained system when I'm sitting and I'm working in Emacs in the terminal, that I don't have to use a mouse, and I can just type, and anything that I need, I can make it as I go. And that's part of the process. That's part of the joy of it, that you can get into a flow state and do that. And I did this before NFTs, just for the pure enjoyment of doing it. And it wasn't until later that I even shared a lot of the stuff that I was doing. So there is an enjoyment of craft that I think that I try to bring and to communicate to people in my audience.
That's very, very interesting. You mentioned you maybe started creating. I think there'll be a lot of creators who might end up listening to this interview and who are listening right now. Mentioned it took you maybe a while. Maybe you were creating with code first, and you took some time to share it. What was your kind of process for creating first versus publishing? Did you think about it a great deal? What's your kind of philosophy when it comes to just getting the work out there into the world?
Well, I could talk about my experience. I don't know if it would be the
Sure.
recommended one, but Deafbeef, the project started at the beginning of the pandemic. And I had this idea. I didn't have a lot of time in my life. We had 2 young kids, and I decided that I was going to do this thing where, because of my, my technical background and some other things that I won't get into too many details, I decided I was going to try to make, weird sounds by writing code. Rather than buying a bunch of modular synths and spending a bunch of money, I was going to do it from scratch. And so that's what I did. And it was just as, kind of to regain agency. It was just for myself so that I had some type of creative outlet during the time constraints of the pandemic. And so I did that late at night, and I did that for about 6 months, and I didn't share it anywhere. It was just for my own pure enjoyment. And when there isn't really like a great way to share that in a sense. And what I discovered was that there was a community on Instagram of people in the modular synth community. They would post their creations, and a lot of it was a video of them plugging patch cables, a lot of flashing lights, kind of being a mad scientist and making cool sounds. But I didn't have any of that, so I just posted screenshots of my code. And because where else do you share only sound? I guess you could share it on SoundCloud, but like you can't get the same type of thing like in social media. You can't just post sound on Twitter. You can't just post sound in a lot of places. There has to be a visual element.
Sure.
And so that's how I got started. I started building a following on Instagram. I was pleased that people were interested in what I was doing, and it was actually from that people recommended. That was like, you know, fall of 2020. They said, "Oh, your aesthetic is, you know, people might be interested in this thing called NFTs." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And it took me a while to kind of get into it, but so I had it pure, you know, pure kind of circumstantial kind of like path like into this.
That's amazing. But you did kind of forge your own path there. You mentioned that it started with audio only. Did the visual aspect just, was that like a natural progression? Was that something you added on after?
Right. So as I said, like when I started, it was meant to be just sound focused. I wanted to focus on that. My background is in music. It's in I ran a recording studio. I wanted to do something with experimental sound. Now then, after posting on Instagram and posting like code screenshots, I thought I also have a background in computer graphics. I studied. I did some research in academic computer graphics at the University of Toronto about 10 years ago. Simulating natural phenomena like fluids to make animation for the film industry. But eventually I decided that, okay, well, maybe I can integrate visuals into this as well and have like sound and visuals that interact with each other, like, you know, are synchronous in different ways. Like there's a lot of material to explore basically at this intersection of audio visual that's not just purely experiences that are not purely audio, not purely visual, but when you put them together, you can get something that you don't have with the sum of their parts. So I became really interested in that, and again, like using code to do this, you can do that type of synchronization. It's not two different people. It's not two different compositions. They're just slapped on to one another. It's kind of like working directly at that intersection. So that was yeah, it morphed into that.
Very, very interesting. I just wanted to share, I'm on your website here. I'm showing it on screen for the people who are watching in, or if you'd like to see, I'm showing it on, you know, on X video and YouTube video as well. I'd have to say, maybe the question, Deafbeef, is what is, as you said, like, it's kind of hard to know where exactly to post audio. There's a visual component as well. What would you say is the best way for people to enjoy and either collect or just purely enjoy your art at the moment? And I guess the additional point to make is this is not just audio and visual. You are still working with physical objects. For example, this hash marks piece, maybe you could explain the difference here as I bring that up.
Sure. Yeah, best way to see my audiovisual work is honestly like in a video on a web browser, right? Like I made it to be online. Like people ask me about, like, you know, how can this be displayed in real life? But that's a whole separate thing. It was originally made like put on headphones and watch the animation in a browser. That's probably the most intimate kind of experience you can have with that. So hash marks, yes. I still incorporate metalwork into many of my art projects. I don't make jewelry so much anymore, but hash marks is a project that I did last year with Bright Moments. And in a nutshell, I made 100 forged talismans that exist on a grid. And there's a these are all hand forged. There's a cryptographic code that's engraved on the back of each one. And I took all of these metal objects in a large stainless steel metal plate down to quote unquote the end of the earth. So in Patagonia at the southern tip of Argentina, in collaboration with Bright Moments, and collectors came with us to have an experience. And we went to a very remote location, and they chose one of these from the grid. And we left the stainless steel plate behind, buried in an undisclosed location. So you can read about it. I probably can't explain too much more of it due to time constraints, but that's it.
That's an awesome story. I remember when I think that was the drop that you were doing on Feral File, which I was mentioning to you beforehand. I was collecting on a little bit. maybe a couple of years ago or so. I thought that was really, really cool. So I wanted to give you a chance to speak to that.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit more about your latest work though. Movable Type. Movable Type is described as an experimental, open-ended, participatory on-chain word game. It's a timed edition where participants can mint randomized characters. Each character is an NFT, which can be fused together with other characters by burning the NFTs to create a new NFT of the word you have created, a process which cannot be reversed. I hope that explains it properly, but maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Deafbeef. And I just wanted to ask what inspired you to kind of create this.
Sure. Yeah, I think that was a good intro. Yeah. So Movable Type. So this is a project that's the title of it. This is about letterpress. This is about printing. And the form it takes is as you said, it's an NFT collection. But you're gonna mint letters, right? And then you're gonna burn them through a burn mechanism and put them together into words, right? And this sounds like very like, oh well, what the heck? Like, letters and words, like that's pretty like, so what? But that's, if you think about it, that's really important. That's like pretty magical, right? And I took some time to read some books about the history of print and the history of writing, and it was fascinating. I'm a newbie to media art history or media history, history of technology in the sense. But the way it came about was last year, 2023, during the open edition meta. If people kind of remember that, there was this open edition meta. And at the same time, Wordle, the word game, was like going viral. And so I had this idea. It's like, oh, like, and like Jack Butcher made checks, and there was a burn mechanism. There were some other projects before that had interesting burn mechanisms, so the projects were deflationary. And so I had this idea. It's like, okay, why not just letters? That would be cool, right? And then people could do this burn mechanism and to have it be deflationary and have them crystallize into words. And there'd be different transformations, and like, how are people going to value them? What will people choose to spell? And it just seemed kind of like an interesting experiment, but I couldn't do it at the time because of I built it out, but it was way too expensive with the gas costs on Ethereum L1. And so fast forward a year later, and Han came to me and told me about Shape, and about the ethos of Shape as like kind of the web of NFTs. So I was like, okay, I think this would be maybe a good opportunity to revive this project. I think it fits really well. So that's how that came about.
That's really, really interesting. One of the projects which Han spoke to me about before we kind of started working together, when he was explaining how excited he was about what was happening on Shape, was this specific project. So that's really awesome. Han, since Deafbeef mentioned very excited to be doing this on Shape, what's exciting you about this project in particular? Why do you think you're like super well placed to be able to host this particular piece?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'll remark that it really is interesting that Deafbeef, the blacksmith, is now creating letters, a letterpress, the printing press of movable type printing press on chain. Of course, the original printing press and movable type also required blacksmithing. So I thought that was really, really cool. What I think is really interesting about this is, so Deafbeef has actually been writing a lot of content, or a lot of words about this topic, that words are foundational. They constitute basically all the things that we do, the prose, the rhetoric, all of it comes from words, and it spans the entirety of books to religions to how we organize ourselves as government, and so words are foundational to human civilization. And what I'm really excited about, what he has done, he has put in so much effort and details into what could be foundational building blocks on chain. So lots of things could be built on top of Movable Type. And all the dynamics that he's introduced into Movable Type will allow for that. And I'm sure Deafbeef could speak about it, but I'm very excited about it being a foundational layer, lots of things being built, and the web of NFTs being built on top of this.
That web of NFTs is a phrase that I'm hearing a lot of artists continuously use when they speak about Shape. Deafbeef, maybe a follow-up on the project itself. I understand that though the words cannot be repeated, they are mutable. So in the sense that they can have letters added to them. And once one word is taken, no one else can create that word. So what was your thinking about this? And as an artist, when you're the creator of the work, but then you're allowing other people to have some agency too, do you have any expectations or hopes for how participants will interact with the piece, or do you hope they just do what they will with it?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, part of the interest for me, like my personal curiosity, is this as a social experiment, and to see what words will people value, right? Like, what will they choose to spell? And like not just words, like it's a 2D grid, right? So, like print is spatial. Like it's about fixing letters in space, right? So you can make concrete poetry, you can make ASCII art. There's a lot of different structures that you can make beyond words, because I mean, spoken words are very, very different than written words, and are very, very different from printed words. That's the whole point of this. The technology that we treat as kind of like we're like fish in water. We don't know the water's there. We're immersed in print. Like this is what we live within, and it's hard to really have a sense of how drastically that technology has changed our conceptions about things as fundamental as, say, time. Okay, so that's sort of like the philosophical part of it. Now I think it will also be of interest for other people. They're going to be curious. Okay, what are other people going to spell? Right. So I want to keep it open-ended. Right. I'm not going to tell anybody that you have to do it a certain way. It's kind of wide open. Oh yeah, I should make the point, like you said, if you spell a word, then you get it. Think about ENS, think about DNS names, like domain names, think about vanity license plates. It's kind of like you get to own a word, right? But so if you spell cat, then that's yours. Someone else could still spell a sentence that has cat in it, right? They just can't spell cat again. But I'm curious, like, what will take place? What will people rush for? Is there going to be like a gold rush for certain words? Are ways that you can interact with this? People could buy someone else's word if they sell it. There's a built-in marketplace, and then they could transform it. It's mutable. Once you spell the word, it doesn't mean that it's done. It's a fragment still. It still can be, you can't reorder it, right? But you could insert spaces, you can insert other letters, and so if you could turn cat into coat, and there's just like a lot of creative possibilities that people could interact with this, and again, like talking about the web of NFTs, like kind of letters are the ultimate composable atomic building blocks, right? That's the whole point of print, and writing, phonetic writing. But the idea that these could be inputs for, say, like another system, right? Like I could imagine I could build a system on top of this, a separate project that would be stringing together words that already existed within this corpus, and then you'd have like a story. But then as people change the underlying words, then it's all going to change, right? So you get kind of this like different kind of observed transformations to these stories, and that's just one idea. It could be an input, like a lot of the inputs for AI. Generative AI systems are text, right? Then you could have that be an input to another system. There's lots of different things that we could do, and that's sort of what I'm hopeful and curious about how people interact with it, and we'll see as we go along.
That's very interesting. I'm conscious of time because we are drawing to the close of the show, so I just wanted to give you a chance, Deafbeef, to, if there's anything we've missed, anything else you'd like to share specifically about it. You did kind of start towards alluding to potential further plans. Would you like to speak a little bit more to that, or just kind of share anything else that you'd like to?
I think that covered. What I'll say is that I did do a lot of. Han mentioned it briefly. But part of this was I wrote a long-winded 5,000 word kind of collection of small essays that go along with this that I think really speak to some of the like the philosophical background, connects it to a lot of different themes within histories and also within other artworks in the NFT space and other artists and other writers. And so that's on the website. So I would encourage people to look through that. I think it's interesting. I think it will be of interest to other people. So it's a word game on the surface, but there's also these other themes under the hood that that I think give it a lot of depth.
That's fascinating. 5,000 word essay on the website. Definitely go and check it out. I will shortly. Han, any final thoughts from you? Obviously, we know the drop is going live tomorrow, I believe. Anything else we need to know?
Yeah, going live tomorrow. And I will be there to very quickly mint a couple things that I really want to get. So
what word are you going for?
Don't say it. Don't speak it. Don't speak it.
Indeed,
keep it secret.
Indeed. I will keep it secret for now. But I'm very excited for this. There's a.
I'm going to get legendary.
Yeah, on the surface, I think Movable Type seems to be a simple thing, but indeed, as Deafbeef said, it's actually quite a very complex thing, which is the start of something I think amazing. So really excited for it.
Hope so. Sounds very, very fascinating. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. That is the conclusion for today's show. Thanks to Deafbeef for joining us and giving us all the amazing context on his latest piece of work. Thanks Han and Shape for facilitating this conversation. Thanks to our partner for today's show, Gondi, for seeing the vision for the modern market and Shape partnership. Gondi is the premier NFT lending platform where there are routinely millions of dollars of loans given against the top NFTs. So check them out if you're looking to earn as a lender or unlock liquidity as a borrower. And thanks, of course, to all of you for tuning in today. Remember, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour, live on X Spaces, X Video, and YouTube. You can catch up with us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts too. Deafbeef, thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you.